It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege of interviewing the UMaine Farmington's assistant alpine skiing coach, Karen Finnochio. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Brandon? Thanks for having me on. I'm very excited.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in coaching at college alpine skiing?
It was a bit serendipitous. I was an athlete my entire life. I grew up playing sports from a very young age. Played, a plethora of sports in high school, and then went on to be a college athlete. And as I was finishing up my time as a college athlete and student, I realized that some of the greatest life lessons that I'd always learned had come from sports arenas, and whether that be fields or tennis courts or a ski hill, or a sailing regatta. And so it was serendipitous that I started coaching when I was in college to earn some extra money. Grew up ski racing, but knew I didn't want to do that in college, and had a couple of people take me under their wing, and I achieved certifications and opportunities that led to a career in coaching that was definitely unexpected, but I treasure every minute of the opportunities that I had, and the people who saw potential in me, my coaches, that saw that potential in me when I didn't necessarily see it myself.
What was that experience like for you playing collegiate soccer and going to Maine Black Bears?
So playing collegiate soccer, I knew from day one in high school, I wanted to play soccer in college. I was committed to that. I loved it. I loved soccer. Was grateful for opportunities with longstanding teammates and phenomenal coaches. And so when that dream came into fruition, I had some great options and knew that I loved Maine. And so I chose UMaine Black Bears. I was a diehard Mainer. That's where I grew up ski racing. And to put the jersey on and represent Maine and hear the Maine Stein song, and be an athlete and a teammate alongside, fellow D1 athletes, especially with the hockey at the time, with Sean Walsh and Keith Carney and Bob Beers and all these amazing players that went on to the NHL. It was just special. I loved it. To this day, I still giggle over some of the jokes and fun we had as teammates in Orono, and certainly some of our travels to where the only green pitch that we had was the soccer field, and everything else was a little brown because of the nature of the environment.
Of course, growing up in Maine, what was that like getting to represent the Maine Black Bears and putting on that uniform for them?
So I split my time. I grew up in Marblehead, Massachusetts. I was blessed to have my parents had a second house up at Sugarloaf. And so I split my time between Massachusetts and Maine, and consider myself a Mainer. Always will be Maine. Maine always resides dear to my heart, but it was just special. I mean, Maine is a special place. The Maine Black Bears it's a culture. It's the pride of Maine, and it is just it's a very special system with incredibly talented people. And to be able to, to be able to wear a UMaine jersey, it was, I don't know, it's tough to describe, but it was really sweet. It was very special.
For you, what was that transition like going from playing soccer to getting into alpine skiing?
So the transition to alpine skiing was fairly seamless, because I did it to help pay for expenses in college. I transferred after my freshman year from Maine to Bates College and played soccer and tennis at Bates. And to help out with expenses. I started coaching part-time. I had my old coach said, I need a female coach for some young girls that are in the weekend program. Do you want to do it? And I said, great. Never thought of what it would lead to. But it was different because soccer is such a team sport, whereas skiing is really individual. At a junior level, it's very individual. Even though you represent a program or you represent a country, it's still your individual performance, right, from start to finish. So it's a little different, but you're able to draw across some similar skill sets from the team space into the individual space.
What was it like for you getting into coaching and coaching on the mountain skiing team?
So Mammoth, my time at Mammoth was started by my time at Carrabassett Valley Academy. I was very young. I was leading up the weekend program at Carrabassett Valley Academy with over 200 athletes and 16 coaches. I was just cool. I was like, oh boy, here we go. And my mentors saw that I had potential, and there were very, very few women in coaching at the time. Certainly very few head coaches, women head coaches. And one of them said, you need to go out to Mammoth for a plethora of reasons. The opportunity to go out west, the fact that just about every national program, men and women, went through Mammoth at some point in time in the calendar year. So whether it be fall leading into the World Cups that were in the US, and the Women's World Cup hosted at Mammoth, or the men's teams that would come in that were getting ready for the events in Colorado. And then in the spring, on the flip side, you had all your education, you had your product testing, you had your spring camps. So it was somewhat of a hub, much to my surprise, when I got out there. And so it was fantastic to watch and see how Norway did things versus how Austria did things. And the women's program with the Germans, I mean, it was the trifecta of Ertl, Seisinger, and Gerg. I mean, they were three amazing female skiers that just dominated on the women's circuit. And you had Deborah Campagnoni, who was, again, dominant force on the women's side. And then on the Austrian side, I mean, that was the powerhouse. You had Hermann Maier, you had the whole plethora that came through. And so it was a bit of a pinch me moment to get out to Mammoth, because here I am watching and coaching alongside and working camps, and you're on the same hill with these incredible athletes, and you're watching their performance, their psyche, how they're handling pressure. You're watching the coaching staff, how they're balancing that. You're watching the sports science staff. I mean, the Austrians were very scientific in their testing. I mean, Mammoth, when you're training, Mammoth is at 9,500 feet. Right? So you're at elevation. That does something physiological to your body when it comes to fatigue and oxygen transport and your lactic acid. And so how you manage that. And these were all things that were very formative at a young age on how you think about going down a ski hill. And sometimes you're going right to left or left to right, but there are a whole lot of other variables to think about it. And I was just blessed, and I was blessed to learn from, again, another group of just really amazing leaders in this field. And again, being a female, there were very few female coaches. So I was blessed that I, again, had some other people who said, hey, Finnochs, let's bring you along. You're learning, you're doing some great things, so let's give you this opportunity. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful.
While at Mammoth, what was that experience like, getting to see athletes from other countries in skiing coming through your facility?
It was, I will tell you, it was awe-inspiring. I mean, the first time I was like a kid on Christmas morning, it was like, oh my gosh, it was like, these are people that I have watched religiously, compete in the World Cups all over Europe. And to be able to step back and watch them in person was definitely a pinch me moment. But then to also step back and realize, wow, like you're getting to see what the cameras don't show you. You're getting to see the struggles. You're getting to see the frustrations, but you're also getting to see the refinement. Like, where are they testing? How are their approach? Like all these other pieces that it was truly spectacular. And then from, in the spring, which was a very different focus because competition season had ended. And so now you're going into your product testing. So how are they working with the hard good companies? What are they looking for? What are they feeling? Like, how are they training? How are they recovering? All the training cycles. I could have sat in a classroom for 40 hours a week for weeks on end, and I still wouldn't have been able to even scratch the surface of that learning opportunity.
What was that experience like, getting to work with the U.S. skiing on the national side of the junior side?
It was an incredible time. Again, I was one of the only females that was doing that. I was blessed that I had friends that I started coaching with way back when I was in college, who were national team coaches, and we had worked our way up, and they knew I was out at Mammoth, and proximity was great because there were a lot of camps at Mammoth. There were a lot of camps at Mount Hood. So the travel was easy. I was usually in the right space at the right time. But I also had those fellow coaches that I worked with earlier that said, hey, Finnochio, we need an extra coach. Would you come along? And there were a couple camps. There was a men's US ski team camp at Mount Hood. That was another really big pinch me moment, like really big pinch me moment. And it was incredible athletes that went on from that camp that went on to win multiple World Cups, multiple World Cup titles, Olympic medals, some of them gold. And that was fascinating to be able to work with them before they're even at that stage, right? Even if for a flickering moment, you're able to kind of immerse yourself in that space. For me, why it became even more pinch me was, I remember the head coach at the time said to me, Finnochio, can you run this meeting? I'm going to go do an airport run. I'm going to go grab the other coach who's coming in. And I said, okay, great, no worries. Didn't bother to ask who the other coach was. Usually kind of knew the rotating faces that were coming in. And so we load the van at dark 30, 5 a.m. to head up to the glacier to go set the course. And I'm in the van and I look across and it's Phil Mayer. Now, in skiing, if you don't know who Phil Mayer is, Phil Mayer was he had an identical twin brother. He and his twin brother, they were two of the best male alpine skiers in the history of US alpine skiing. As a kid, I had him plastered on my wall. His posters were everywhere. His brother's posters were everywhere. I was mesmerized by the 1980 Olympics, just watching him in Europe and the battle within Ingemar Stenmark in this head-to-head competition. I mean, it was so formative for me as a young athlete to understand like this fight, this grit, this dig. And here I am in a van sitting across from him, transported back in my brain to when I was, young, when I was a little kid watching him going, oh, wow, okay, this is going to be cool. And then we were up on the hill coaching and there isn't enough snow to ski down. So you ride the chairlift down. It's called downloading. So we were downloading off the two chairs and I happened to be on the chair with him. And I asked him a very simple question. I said, do the guys on the team now understand your role, your significance, what you did for US skiing on an alpine level? Do they understand your impact? He said, well, they kind of do. And he starts going into this incredible story of his first time, at Innsbruck, and when he was going up against Stenmark and the Hahnenkamm and his first Olympic gold. And all of the stories he's telling, visually, I remember being that little kid mesmerized by his performance. So it was like someone sitting on my shoulder in the chairlift going, is this real? Like, are you really hearing the firsthand account about this? And that was so special. And it left a mark a coaching mark about perspective and how formative and how even the most insignificant events that you think are insignificant can be really formative down the road. And so that was one of the true precious moments. And then the second, working with the US ski team, with the para athlete team. I will tell you, the para athletes, there was an alpine skier by the name of Monty Meyer, who again dominated on an international front, and being able to work with the para athletes and their grit and their fight, and that camp rolled right after the men's camp, and it was just this total difference of grit and intensity, and it was very grounding for me to do those. And then, to have another skier, Chris Waddell, who was able-bodied till his freshman year at Middlebury, broke his back, and then came back in a sit ski as a para athlete and just absolutely slayed the field, not only on the alpine level in a sit ski, but then he dominated Summer Olympics with marathons in the wheelchair. And I just look at that, and it's just so formative of, you just never underestimate anyone's potential and never underestimate your influence as a coach. Even if you don't view it as significant, someone else can see it as incredibly significant. So you have to remember that. And I do remember that. And that was the US team, the opportunity of working with the teams, really kind of goes back to that environment.
After your time of working with the US team, what was that transition like, going back to the college level and coaching at Brown?
It was a phenomenal opportunity. I was working as a head coach at a Park City ski team, and the opportunity came up to run my own program. To really, the buck stopped with me. It was my philosophy. It was my recruiting. It was how I viewed all these years and years and years of work and learning and constant learning, to pull it into a program. And everyone said, why are you going to Brown? There's no mountains. They got a ski team. And I've always been the champion of the underdog. Not that they were an underdog, but in the perceived view of the college realm, they were an underdog. And suffice it to say, the philosophy worked, the recruiting worked, the women, my women's team absolutely dominated. It was a build in year one, and then years 2, 3, and 4, they just absolutely dominated. In the top 15, we would pretty much put our entire team in the top 15. Majority of the time, the team would be in the top 7 or top 10, with quite a few sitting in the top 5. So, and that was them, right? It was, you have to give them latitude. The cool part about making the shift from junior to college is that the focus is different. These student athletes, I knew, were so driven, not only on the ski hill, they were phenomenal athletes on the hill, but they were also phenomenal students. So you have this wonderful blend of, like, people who are going to go out into the world and do these incredible things, and they're able to be athletes also. And so, much like when I was a college athlete, I wanted to give them skills of resiliency, of thinking differently, of innovating, of iterating, of tools that, while I hope they loved and stayed on the ski hill, I knew that they were destined for medical school or graduate school. And so to be able to give them skill sets where, hey, you gotta he just fell really hard into the fence. Like, you got to pick yourself up. You got to go, like, figure out a way to work through it and move on. And so I was really grateful with Brown, and to come into Brown and have one of the largest athletic departments. We had 34 varsity sports. I was one of 34 head coaches. And we had a phenomenal team of head coaches. I will tell you, that bunch of coaches that I got to work with, to this day, like, I'm still friends with a handful of them, and they were just phenomenal. Super supportive, championed each other's programs. It was not what I expected in a D1, certainly a D1 Ivy program. So.
What was that, as you said, what was that transition like, going from a D1 Ivy program to coming to UMaine Farmington?
So the good news was I had taken a little hiatus. I went to graduate school. I coached, I had coached part-time a little bit after leaving Brown, but really had some other things that I wanted to achieve. One of them was a graduate degree. Another was, I'm also a competitive sailboat racer. So there was tremendous opportunity when you're in Brown and Rhode Island. Sailing is also part of the culture. And so I was fortunate to explore those roles. And to come back to Farmington is so special. It is so special on many levels. The people who I said at the beginning saw more potential in me than I saw in myself. The person who really was behind that was this guy by the name of Tom Reynolds, named Coach. In the industry, he's known as Coach. And Coach had this thick Maine accent, and he said, "Finnochio, this is what you're gonna do." And he took me under his wing when I was just starting, and he was the brains behind the US ski team coaches education, and really laid that grounding work. And he founded the program at UMaine Farmington. Some of my best friends to this day are alums of that program. And so to have the opportunity to go back to Farmington, to give back to a program that gave me everything that I had in coaching. Like, there are a few times in life where you get those special opportunities, and this was one of them. And kind of the sweeter part of the deal was that I got to do it working for one of my former athletes. So this was an athlete, I believe I coached him for 4 or 5 years. And we got talking in I think February of 23 about me coming back and what it would take, and kind of the nuances. And I thought more about it, and I said, "You're going to the program that gave you everything, to the person, like, one of the most formative people in your life. You get to give back to the state of Maine that you love dearly, in an area that gave you everything. That's where you grew up." I grew up with Sugarloaf Mountain in Maine, is one of our home hills. That's where I grew up. And then to do it alongside one of my former athletes, who is and will always be one of my athletes. I will champion his goals. I will support him. I will be his advisor. Once you're my athlete, you're always my athlete. I don't care how old you are. And it just was really special. And then to come into this team at Farmington with athletes who were very different than the students of Brown. Very different culture, very different focus. But I will tell you, the bunch of athletes that I was welcomed by, holy cow. I mean, the universe was smiling, because these athletes are incredibly hardworking. They're great students, student athletes. They're great people. And I couldn't have asked for a better transition back into the world of coaching than Farmington, and the whole package that Farmington had. So,
what was that feeling like for you, coming to UMaine Farmington and getting to coach those athletes and seeing them ski down the hills?
it was fun. It was funny because they didn't know me from anyone, right? So they had known me for maybe 30 seconds. I had met a couple of them the February preceding. They had kind of heard about me, but they didn't really know. They're like, what? And so, I got back on the hill and again, right? I'm an assistant coach. They don't know me. I don't know them. We're kind of sorting each other out. And they realized that I think one of the athletes had one of the best comments. I think it came out maybe late January or February. They said, "Oh, how do you and Coach Andy Willihan, my boss, the program director," he goes, "You and Andy are like the same person." I was like, well, you kind of realize he skied for me for 5 years. So like there's already that synergy, there's already that dynamic. And it was fun. It was fun to learn their idiosyncrasies, what resonated, what connected. I could see both Andy and I could see potential. Like it, as a coach, there's nothing more invigorating than when you see potential in an athlete. Like you can see it, you can see them chipping away, you can see them knocking on the door, you can see those flickers, right? And with team skiing, it's not even just individuals, it's the individual achievement, but then you start to see the teamwork congeal, and you start to see, it's like taking a blob of clay, right? And you're throwing it on the wheel and you just kind of start shaping it. And so sometimes the pot caves totally in, and yeah, that's going to happen. And then you reform it and reconfigure. But it was so great because there were these moments, and it just built and built. And there were, come February at our regionals, you could see it. Like I could just, Annie and I was like, oh, they're knocking on the door. They're knocking on the door. Like we can see it. Like it's palatable. Like you see the coaches are like, come on, come on, come on. We know you got it. We know you got it. And then they do it. And you see it. And then there's this moment when it comes together for the first time, both individually and team-wise. And it comes together and you look at your athletes and you say, how's it feel? Because that's the feeling. That's what it takes. And then there's this moment of belief. And when you shift from, we think we can, that frustration, and there's this switch to belief, that is just, it is the most rewarding moment for me as a coach, is to see it go into, I don't know I can, but now I know I can. And it's the, I know I can, I know we can. How do we make it work? How do we get it going? And that was in February at regionals. And then when it came to college nationals, at Lake Placid at Whiteface, I will tell you, it was a magic moment. It was getting to go to Whiteface again, back to the 1980 Olympics, right? I was mesmerized. This place was like Mecca for me, right? I'm like, Miracle on Ice. We've got Herb Brooks. We've got the ski hills. We've got like, I just love that vibe. And trying to get the student athletes, like, go learn about this. You've got to understand like where you are in like sports history. Like this place is amazing. And then I have Andy Willihan, who's one of my athletes, and I know his goals. And we've talked about goals for the program. And so we're kind of going in, there's a lot of good momentum. And then we start to see that momentum start to come into fruition. And it happened on the first day. We're like, all right, they're knocking on the door. Then the second day for the men's program, so the first day they ended up 4th in the giant slalom, which they had never in program history done that. Huge. And that was one of Andy's goals, top 5. And so we laid out. So then on slalom day, they end up 6th. So they end up 5th overall, right? 2 goals down. He was like, these were like mid to long-term goals. It's like, we just knocked them off in like 2 days. It's like, all right, let's see where this goes. And you could see the boy, sorry, they're not boys, they're men, young men. When I've been at this long enough, everyone are like kids. I'm old enough. But you can see this dynamic form of belief. Now there's belief like we just missed an opportunity. Now there's the fire, and it's like, oh boy, this is going to get really interesting, because the third day, which is the dual slalom, is a different format. It's head to head. You see who's your competitor. They're standing right next to you, and you go head to head, parallel courses, best, you race 5, and it's like best 3 out of 5. And I was like, okay, this format bodes well. This bodes well. They are fighters. They are grit. They will dig, and they are a team. And they just kept knocking on the door, and they kept knocking off teams. And I'm like, and you could see them like, we could do this. Like, oh yeah, you can. And it's rare that usually Andy and I are on course. I happen to be at the start, and on they just missed out for the finals. So to go for first or second, they were racing for third or fourth, and they pulled it off. They skied brilliantly. They skied as a team, and it was their first ever podium in a college nationals. And they looped around. I had tears in my eyes at the start. They were like, oh my God. And all you can say as a coach to them when that happens is, I'm like, soak it in. Soak in the feeling, soak in the achievement, because these don't come very often. And you have to understand, and you have to soak it in what that feels like. And then I will tell you, one of the best hugs that I've ever had in my life was when we got to the bottom. I came down and Andy was at the finish, and I looked at him. I'm like, dude, there you go. I was like, you just hit 3 goals in 3 days for the Alpine program. And it was, I said, once you're my athlete, you're always my athlete. And that's, I couldn't be prouder. I couldn't be prouder of what he's built, how he's done it. The athletes, both on the men's and women's side, it's very special. It's a very special environment.
Who are some of the teams in the conference that you compete against?
So regular conference, like our weekend competitions, usually are St. Joe's, College of Maine, Bowdoin is in there. Regionals is Babson, Castleton, Clarkson, Yukon are some of the bigger teams, and then nationals. Fortunately, we are in a very, very difficult region. So most of our toughest competitors we see at our regionals. But you also have Rocky Mountain College out of Montana. You have St. Olaf out of Minnesota. You have Northern Michigan as well, that are at a national level, are really difficult. The one special part I will say about Farmington is a lot of those other teams have a significant amount of European skiers. Farmington does not. We are much like Brown. When I was at Brown, most of the other teams, all of the other programs had European skiers. We did not. And to see the grit and the level and the confidence and the growth with both the women's team and the men's team is pretty special. Again, especially against some really tough competition.
Of course, what is it like going against those tough competitions like Clarkson and like Castle?
Again, at first it can be really intimidating. I know that the athletes, they were like, oh, they kind of get in their own head, as rightly so, right? Athletes do that. They're like, oh, can I do this? Like, that's part of it. But once they, a lot in time training, we do a lot of time training runs, so that with other programs, so you're able to see like, hey, on these courses, when you do it in training, you're fast. Like this is no different. It just happens to be a race day. So you're already instilling that confidence in training, right? You're not throwing anything unexpected at them on race days. That's not necessarily a recipe for success. They've practiced it, they've repeated it. And then there's a certain energy that goes with regionals, and certainly with nationals, it's higher pressure. But you really try and reel them back into like, hey, this is no different. You have raced this hill how many times? And they're like, oh yeah, okay. So you're just trying to like reset that focus so that they remember you are completely competent. You can do this. The only one standing in your own way is you.
Can you
So
talk about the culture that you've helped to build for UMaine Farmington skiing?
sure, it is. So it's not unfamiliar. It is about communication, and it is about attitude. And we are family. We expect communication, and we expect good attitude. And it's you don't give up. You don't quit. Falling is a learning opportunity. Failing is a learning opportunity. These are all learning opportunities. We do expect communication, and we do expect a good attitude. In terms of a good attitude for us is you're ready to work, you're looking out for your teammates, right? This is a we before me environment, always, coaches included. We before me, and we work together, and the teams are really fantastic. We're blessed to have really good leadership on both the men's and the women's side, with captains who help also grow that culture. But and we have that culture across the multiple disciplines that are all part of the snow sports program at Farmington. So with the Nordic program and the free ski and the snowboard program, us as coaches have that same mutual level of respect, and support for one another. Hey, how you doing? Anything you need. That's a staple question. Those are staple questions that get asked like repeatedly throughout the day, whether it be virtual or on hill. So,
of course, as you talked about that, what is that like, having sports like alpine skiing, Nordic, and snowboarding all in the same program?
I'll tell you, this past year at Lake Placid, it was pretty spectacular, because the success had a ripple effect. We had national champions, collegiate national champions in snowboard and in free ski. We had team national champions in snowboard. We had top 15 in women's Nordic skiing. I mean, it's infectious, right? This wonderful team feeling, this wonderful support and respect for achievement, no matter the discipline, is just fantastic. And that was the first time that I had really experienced it across the breadth of all disciplines. Usually I've been in the alpine world for long enough that it lives in that alpine world. And I'll tell you, as a coach, it was just the culture. It was so much fun. And I will tell you, there were some of the snowboard athletes and free ski athletes. There was one in particular who had gritted it out. He was a senior. He had been digging for 4 years, and he was finally atop the national podium. And you know what? To look at him and say, you helped build this. You helped build this. And it's just, those are special times as a coach, to get athletes to realize their impact, because hopefully they can go out in the big bad world and have a little bit of that same kind of focus and influence positively over the world that they're in.
What does that recruitment process look like for the alpine skiers? And as a coach, what do you look at in those prospective student athletes?
So it's a mix, right? So certainly skiing history comes into play. You've got to look at past results. But past results are not prologue. Like they one of the best athletes that I ever recruited when I was at Brown, she had blown her knee out, and she was overlooked by a lot of other programs because she was coming back from an ACL injury. I looked at that. I knew how she was skiing going in. She was skiing very, very fast. She blew out her knee from a fall because she was skiing really fast. And so I went to her coaches and I said, hey, talk to me about her rehab program. What's she like in PT? What's she doing for rehab? How is she coming back? And recruited her. And she turned out to absolutely, when she was healthy after her ACL, she just decimated the field. I mean, she was without a doubt one of the fastest athletes on the hill. So I think when you look at athletic talent, there's that resiliency. So even if there's an injury, it's what caused the injury? How are they coming back? How are they rebounding? How are they improving and coming back stronger? The other really important piece certainly is, how are they as a student? And then how are they as a person? How are they in the world around them? That's as much a part of a team as anything. We've all worked in spaces where you've had that person that kind of always sees the glass as like half empty and the sky is always falling, and it makes it difficult. So you certainly look for contributions. Where and how are they contributing? Do they have a job? Do they have have they done a lot of community service? Where's their impact? I will tell you, there's one of our athletes a couple of them, actually, I shouldn't just say one, but there are a couple of them that work on fishing boats in the summer. One runs a business with a brother, and what they're doing and how they're doing it, that's not easy work. I mean, that's grit. Like, that is gritty work. And so there's something to be said about that. So as you recruit and as you look, there's got to be that level of grit and resiliency.
As a coach, what is it like seeing your freshmen put on that UMaine Farmington skiing jersey for the first time versus your seniors putting it on for the last
time? Oh gosh, the first year's putting it on is really special. I mean, it's like, all right, here we go. This is going to be a heck of a ride. The seniors are it tugs at my heartstrings, because you've seen them, you've watched them, right? You've watched them develop, you've watched them change, you've watched them grow, and you know that they're going to go out into the world and hopefully with a love of skiing, right? At the end of the day, we just want you to love skiing. Like, even if your ski racing days are over, like, love the sport, go have fun with it. I will say that this past year, we had two seniors. We're blessed that they had an extra year of eligibility due to COVID, the COVID pandemic, and they're returning. So I was very sad on senior day, because I was like, oh, and then they pinged me and they said, oh, coach, I'm coming back, and I was like, do it for another year. But it's your seniors, it's special. It's a special gift to be able to give a senior a hug, congratulate them on their graduation, and then to see where they go. I mean, I have athletes who from Brown who are now doctors and surgeons, and they have kids and their own families, and they're bringing their kids out on the hill, and their kids are learning how to ski, and it's just, those are very special. Like it, and again, it's for a brief flickering moment in their life journey. And if you can, I mean, I feel so lucky that, especially with some of the athletes, that I've had, that I've been able to work with. There were a couple that went on to the Olympics that have achieved at the highest level, and to understand their journey, to understand the struggles, to understand the hard work and the toil and the sweat and the failures and the frustration that leads to that. And the backstory, right? You understand that backstory, and it is so special. Like I remember when one of the athletes won their first ever Olympic medal. I had their goal sheet in my hand, and I remember, the goal sheet was, I want to win an Olympic gold for the US ski team. And when you have that goal sheet and you see it on the television, I mean, again, tears were pouring out of my eyes, but you've seen the developmental journey, you see the struggles, you see that success, and it just, if you have the opportunity for even like a flickering second to be part of that, those are the pieces that I hold dear. In my office, I have a bunch of signed, the team photos with signatures and stuff, and those I look up, and I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful that someone, when I was developing, took the chance on me and saw my potential, and that's kind of what I hope to have happen for seniors, and especially for first years. So,
As a coach, what is it like seeing your athletes go on and represent the national team and make the Olympic roster?
oh, it's it is so special, and whether it be their first one, or their fourth, or in some cases fifth, it's so special. I mean, you just go back to your flickering moment in that space, and you remember, you remember the struggles. You remember sometimes looking at them and be like, hey, like, if you don't make this adjustment, those dreams, they're going to be harder to get to, right? Sometimes you have that little tough love, that little reality mirror check to them. But I will say, one of the blessings of social media, and this is before things have really gotten controlled now, in this day and age, but when social media first kind of came on the scene, it was really fantastic to be able to communicate with those athletes directly, and they're in their first you get to watch them walk in an opening ceremony. Like, they're just like, this is so cool. And you're just championing them, being their champion from afar. So it's so special. And then also on the flip side, the coaches that go along with that, it's coaching. Alpine skiing is a tough life. You're on the road. You are traveling continuously. You're basically living in winter. Like, it's a hit or miss when you get to see your families. And it's a really difficult grind. And sleep is highly overrated. There are a lot of mornings where you're on the hill at 4 a.m. and it's a highly physical job, which is, more so because you're carrying a lot of equipment, and there are a lot of pieces that go into being a ski coach. So to look at the athletes, but also the coaches that get to be there, it's special. It's really, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would have that. And kudos to Coach Reynolds, because he saw that I could do it, and put a little bit more belief in me at the time. And there's still pinch me moments when I see it. It's still really special.
What are some of your future plans for the program moving forward?
Again, to continue the growth, to continue the growth and depth, and both in athletic talent, in terms of, on the alpine side, also continue the growth and development of the athletes who are there, but also in that growth and development also comes with the culture, right? Really, really continuing to develop that, we before me, and I can do this attitude. Anyone who knows me, I'm a very positive person. I tend to smile a lot. I tend to laugh a lot. There is a distinct line. And athletes know when you cross the line, like, it's like, oh yeah, you don't want to cross that line with Finnochio. But it takes a lot to get there. But what's been really exciting is to see, if that line gets crossed, to see the immediate resiliency, to see the shift, to see the change. There was one athlete who had given up on herself in training, and like, she had a bad turn, and kind of body language just sunk, and you could just see her just deflate. And I called her over, and I was like, that was your one and done. She's like, what do you mean, my one and done? And she kind of giggled. I said, oh, no, I'm being serious here. That was your one and done. You don't give up. You don't quit like that. You don't let that negative self-talk take over. That was it. No more. Figure it out. And it was at regionals. It was a really brutal course. This was in January, early January, when we had that conversation. Regionals, mid-February, cold, nasty, tough light, tough visibility. And she skis past where I am on the course, and I hear her, I will not quit. I will not quit. And I can hear the self-talk. And I was like, and that's why I do this job right there. That mindset. And so to be able to build that culture so that we can have not just the coaches building it, but also the athletes, that's the culture you come into. So for us, it's really about communication, attitude, and culture. Those pieces are right, the skiing follows.
What advice would you give those incoming freshmen entering their first year of alpine skiing?
Learn, be open-minded, learn from your captains, watch, and step in, lean into the opportunity. I think that first year students coming in, it's hard enough. They're trying to figure out their own identity. Where do I fit? How do I fit? Oh my goodness, I'm on this new team. Like, they're all that like self chatter and the stories that go on in their own heads. And they're like, no, it's okay. And so I think that really trying to keep an open mind, trying to, minimize the self-judging and look at the culture around you and observe and watch and certainly ask questions are really important because there are, I can't speak highly enough about the athletes that we have at Farmington. They are, I hate summer because I don't get to see them. I don't get to talk to them, albeit very infrequently. And they really are, every single one of them, really interesting people on their own. Together, they bring so much fun and so many laughs. And it just, for a first year coming in, look around and just start to soak that in because it's special.
What advice would you give those athletes looking to go represent the national team and make the Olympic roster?
I think it's a little bit of a different pathway. There's certainly more opportunity from the junior pathway than the college pathway. Although Paula Motzlon is I think that's how I pronounce her last name. I was mutilated, but she came out of Middlebury. I believe Middlebury or Dartmouth, and she's doing great. But the junior track is tough. It's very difficult. It's very competitive. Some of it can be subjective. And again, I think it's about, to get to those levels, you need to build not only your physical, your physical strength and your physical skill set, but you have to build the mental skill set. You have got to start doing that very early. You have got to understand sports psychology and what those pieces are and how the brain can really make you do amazing things sometimes, even when your body's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That old adage, mind over matter. Yeah, mind over matter. There are times where the brain and that mental horsepower will bring you through times that you really didn't think you could ever master. So,
what advice would you give those coaches out there looking to become assistant coaches or even head coaches in alpine skiing?
Get on a race hill and start finding the other coaches and start having conversations, right? Start asking like, hey, where'd you start coaching? How'd you start doing it? A lot of have those conversations. You'll get, I highly doubt that you will get the same answer from anyone. There may be some aggregate trends, but rarely the same. And I think that I think looking at programs that have been established for quite some time is a great place to start. So whether that be at the, academy level or the bigger program level or even college level, I think those are great places to start. But I would encourage it. I think that encourage the conversation. I will tell you, when I first got into it, it was framed to me was, you get your ski pass, you still get your equipment, and you get to go ski around with a bunch of little rugrats in the woods and in the powder and the bumps, and you'll run some gates, but basically you get to rip around a ski hill with 7 and 8 year olds that just want to be in the trees and in the woods and having fun. And I was like, well, I can do that. So what starts out as innocent as that can really morph into something that's really fantastic.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media along with the program?
Sure. Farmington Skiing is our social media feed. We have great feeds. It covers all the different sports. My personal page is at Finnochio on Insta. Certainly UMF Beavers, the UMF Athletics Insta feed are all great places. All great places to go. I'm also on Facebook, but usually it stems from Insta. So Instagram is my start. Haven't broken off into the TikTok world yet in terms of content creation, but certainly really enjoy a lot on Instagram.
Thank you again, Coach Karen Finnochio, for your interview, and best of luck in your future at UMaine Farmington as the assistant alpine skiing coach.
Great. Thank you, Brandon, for your time, and really hope that at some point we get to meet face to face. But thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Coach Karen Finnochio, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Great. Thanks, Brandon.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.